Is this something I'm going to hear for the first time? I mean, should we stop the record button?
Hey, aloha listeners. Welcome to Embers Rising, the haven for couple entrepreneurs aiming for that sweet harmony between work and life. I'm your host, Wendy Jae, and joining me in this insightful conversation today is my co-host, husband, business partner, twin flame, David Tucker.
And the crowd goes wild.
Today, we're plunging into the hot waters of the topic of avoidance, a common yet often overlooked hurdle, dissecting its ripple effects in both our personal lives and the professional arena. You know, our mission here at Embers Rising is to really rekindle the nurturing space for couple entrepreneurs, fueling the journey towards balance and growth. So super excited about this episode because whether avoidance is a silent guest in your personal journey or a shadow in your workplace, we've got a treasure trove of practical and actionable advice to help you navigate through this. So stay tuned with us as we peel back the layers of avoidance, unveiling strategies to comfort and conquer it. All right here on Embers Rising. And we are back. A warm welcome to you, Mr. David Tucker.
Hey, thank you for having me on our podcast episode. Wait, we're in this together. I've really been looking forward to avoiding this conversation because it's just so prevalent in everybody's lives, right? Avoidance is part of life. But hey, here we are. You're the one that said we're going to do this anyway. So wind this up. What are we going to be talking about here today?
Oh my gosh. So this topic just came on my radar because as we were looking through our topics, I thought, why not get in avoidance? It's like the avoidance topic that you avoid. I want to dive deep into this because this sneaky little behavior affects all of us and it holds us back from reaching our full potential. So I want to talk about like what's hiding behind the mask of avoidance and how to pull back really the curtains on unveiling this behavior and how you can tackle avoidance. So when I was thinking about a topic, I was like, let's dive into the thing that we don't want to dive into, which is avoiding the avoidance. That's how it actually came about.
It's so funny, right? When we pick topics, we're looking at all the positive things that we like to talk about, and the not so positive things, I don't want to call them negative, but the not so positive things usually fall by the wayside, right? Because anytime you dive into a topic like this, the realness is bound to come out. But I think it's important, as brain health coaches, we know that avoidance is human nature, right? Like it's just that thing when there's going to be some sort of friction in your business, in your life, in your relationship with your family. You're like, I don't really want to go there today. But it's part of being a high performer. You have to. And, it's funny when this topic came up, Wendy, do you remember our very first coach like a million years ago?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Shout out to, Dina Payton.
Yeah, Dina Payton, right? So it was interesting. This is exactly where she started in the coaching journey. And I was like, this is where it is. But it's funny. We talked about avoidance. We also talked about avoidance in its different forms, right? Like procrastination is definitely a form of avoidance. I consider poor time management sort of a byproduct or an upstream piece of avoidance. And then there is perfectionism, right? And I think perfectionism is sort of an advanced class form of avoidance. That's my opinion. And what Dina said is, we're talking about things that keep you in your smallness, in your life, in your business, in your relationship. And if your destination is greatness, right? If you want to have a great life in all of those areas, then you need to overcome the things, the smallness in your life to actually excel. So it's interesting that this is sort of where we're starting our episode today.
I agree. And David, speaking at such a high level, I want to go back to what avoidance really is, because I want to talk about the psychology of avoidance. Avoidance is a behavior response where you are choosing to stay not engaged in a certain situation or a decision or an interaction or a task that's causing you more discomfort, more fear, more frustration, more anxiety, even if you didn't know it. That's what the avoidance behavior is. And sometimes we have to think, David, of it as a behavior, not just like the word. It's actually a behavior. Like, oh, that it's like being happy. Okay, there's avoidance. Like it is an avoidance on the behavior chart. Yep, that's an avoidance thing, you know?
I think this is why I was trying to avoid this conversation, because I'm not so sure it's a behavior, right? Maybe, but what we do know for sure is somehow it's become part of your story, right? And your story has everything to do with your past. And I don't know how some people develop these habits, right? These behaviors. I guess behavior is the right word, but oftentimes people themselves don't even know where it's coming from, right? Like on the outside, we all see procrastinators. We all see people that avoid like different things in their life. We're like, huh, that's interesting, but oftentimes people don't see it in themselves, and it's something from deep in the past, and that's why you really need to tackle it, right? Because sometimes for some people it could be harder to extract than for other people.
Well, and the dangerous thing is getting caught in the avoidance anxiety cycle. So when you're faced with something that's spiking your anxiety, your reaction is to avoid it. When you're feeling that sense like you want to have that situation, or you want to go have that conversation, or you want to tackle the task, or the anxiety spikes and then you just avoid it. You're like, well, no, I'm just going to do 10 million other things to do it. And also you see that in other people. In your mind, you think, I wish I could help that person do this, but then you have to go back to yourself too at the same time. Like, hey, what are you avoiding? You know, what is your own anxiety cycle? But you can so see it prevalent in other people, how they're avoiding your friends, your family, you know, someone at work that's like avoiding the thing. Like they said they quit smoking and they're still doing it. They said that they were going to lose 10 pounds. They're still actually not eating a healthy diet to actually lose the 10 pounds, or they're not exercising, or they're not doing the things that they shared with you. So you get caught up in that cycle of anxiety, cycle of avoidance. It keeps spinning out of control. And if you can recognize the cycle, I think that's the first step in breaking free from it. Because when anxiety knocks at your door, you're like, okay, hold on, take control of it. Not just like, okay, it's another thing, you know, and then you move on to the void cycle again.
So I think ultimately, you get to choose, right? And once you recognize that you have that in your life, whatever form of avoidance sort of manifests itself in your life, you've got to decide, are you going to take offense and take action, or are you going to continue to play defense, right? And as Dina would call it, stay in your smallness. But avoidance is definitely a defensive move. And we all know, that offense is the thing that helps you grow. And it means facing, it means taking those uncomfortable actions and going against human nature, going into the friction, going into the fire, right? Doing the thing that you might not want to do because you're afraid of the consequences or some other reason. What do you think, Wendy?
It's just not that easy. I remember, now I myself didn't have a problem with this, but I know someone that did. They had a fear of jumping out of an airplane, and it was their son's birthday, and they did not want to go to the son's birthday. And the whole thing was wrapped about, we're going to jump out of the airplane together and we're going to do this skydiving thing. And so they avoided it. They're like, I'm actually avoiding my kid's party because I just can't bring myself to do the thing. So again, you have to have a strategy to get yourself out of the anxiety avoidance cycle, to live life, to live to your fullest potential, to take the steps. Because what if you took the steps and actually worked out? You know, you're like, oh my gosh, I actually was scared to do this thing. I did it. I took the steps. Or even a meeting. There's definitely been meetings where Dave and I are like, Dave doesn't want to show up to the meeting. I'll show up to the meeting, or vice versa. And then it's like, turns out spectacular. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I went to this meeting, or I'm so glad I met this person, or I'm so glad I jumped on this podcast. You know? So it can be as simple as that, but having the strategies to help. And I've got so much more to share. So I don't want to dive too deep yet, but maybe you have a story here. Because I think I'm feeling a story coming on.
Well, I just want to say, I don't know if jumping out of an airplane is avoidance, because, me, I have a little bit of a thing with heights, even though I force myself to do it. But it just doesn't come natural. So I guess it's a great analogy We were talking about this episode before we hit the record button. And it's interesting, our back and forth with things that we've been avoiding. And, something came up for me because it was recent, right? It was just this weekend. I was married previously, before Wendy and I got together. And there are still some things from that past relationship that are in my closet, literally in my closet. And I've been avoiding them, right? And it has to do with some accounts that are still sort of commingled, or at least I'm attached to, some credit issues, some issues with my passport and names and things like that. And I dove into it this weekend and took the uncomfortable action of, just working through that. I don't want to say I wasted a whole Saturday. It was a great Saturday because I now have lifted the weight of that off of me and resolved so many of those things. And I know Wendy was just downstairs smiling the whole time, knowing that the outcome was going to be so positive. And she'd sort of just nudged me gently into doing it maybe once or twice or 50 times.
I've got to share with our listeners the reality of this. Okay, so listen. So when you buy a new bag of sheets, or a blanket, it comes in like that plastic, like Ziploc bag, and how many would you just like recycle it, throw it away, whatever. David, this was so long ago when we first got together, and we were in Maui, and he put all this paperwork that he wanted to avoid in that zipper like plastic bag. You know what I'm talking about? And
I was trying to avoid it, not lose it, right?
It was an avoidance, and I don't want to lose it. It stayed in the closet. So literally, talking about skeletons in the closet, that dang thing moved around with us all over. And then we were talking about updating our passports, and in order to do that, he needed to get something out of that plastic clear bag. He had to unzip that thing to get to something. And literally, this is such a great story, Dave. I'm so glad you shared this, because in my head, I think of so many lessons that we all can learn of, like shoving something in the closet that we're avoiding, tucking it in our, dresser drawer, sticking it into a box in our, back bedroom underneath the bed, something that was like, don't want someone else to see, or you just don't want to deal with it. It's just there. But hey, congrats, man. You pulled that thing out and tackled whatever you need to tackle out of there to like take the next step to get the thing done, right? That's awesome.
Well, and it's so funny. Before this episode, my phone rang, right? And I looked at my phone and I said, laughing, I said, I'm avoiding you, right? And it's actually a collection agency. They continue to call me once a month regarding an account that I'm not responsible for. And I just sort of avoid, picking up the phone, but I'm going to call them back after this so that they'll stop calling me once a month, because, it's out of the closet now. The bag is out of the closet. So
that's awesome.
The thing about avoidance is really fear, right? And often it's a fear of failure, but not that internal failure, right? It's the failure that other people may have, their perception or opinion of you. And there were things in there that in my perception, I thought Wendy was going to judge me on. I think you've gotten to know Wendy by now. She's very non-judgmental in these things. And I know that. It's just that fear, that perception that spins in your head of what are other people going to think, especially the most important people in your life, right? The people that you love. But the reality is those are really the only opinions that count. And if they're for you, they're for you. And the rest of the world spends very little time thinking about you at all, ever. So I'm just glad I moved through that. Wendy, I know you probably have a story here that you could share when it comes to avoidance. So we can get off the topic of me.
For sure. I've had a conversation that I've been wanting to have with you since we've had a lot of changes this year about 10Xing our personal life. And I have been avoiding the conversation, David, because
is this something I'm going to hear for the first time? I mean, should we stop the record button?
Right? No, I mean, I've mentioned it, I would say, but we haven't carved out the time together to actually prioritize it. It's like always on the back burner. And what do I mean about 10X in conversation? We've had so much change this year. What I want to do is completely overhaul, everything that we're doing. Yeah, we've overhauled a lot of our habits and our work schedule and life schedule, but also there's that mindset space to overhaul. I think that there's a physical side to overhaul. What are you putting in your body? What's the outcome of that? That's the 10X conversation I want to have. And we just haven't had it. So I'm avoiding the conversation, I guess, because I fear like everything else is so much more important when actually this is a really important piece of our entire rest of the year here and moving forward. So that's pretty much it.
Okay.
That's pretty much it. I don't really have Dave's like waiting for something else.
I'm going to need more details, but it sounds like we might need to go to Burger King to have this conversation.
I think it's just scheduling it. I'm getting it on the schedule and saying, hey, this is important and we want to talk about these things. But, also I feel like it's more important to me than it is to you, where you're more comfortable just doing the same habits every day. I am a pusher of new habits. So I constantly push myself with new tools, new programs, new coaches, new courses. I'm constantly pushing myself into different time zones, time frames. It's like fasting. They say don't fast at the same time every day, like change it up. I'm constantly changing up our schedule and I want to have this conversation. So I probably want this conversation a lot more than you want to have this conversation because maybe you're avoiding some things in the conversation. So, there's that.
Well, don't force me to avoid pizza forever. So,
oh my gosh.
But it brings up a good point, and that is, and I think Joe Dispenza talks about this a lot, right? And that is most people, pointing at myself here, are living in the past most of the time. Right now, I probably get a lot of pushback from people. They're like, no, I'm not. But if you really look at the way the timeline of most people's lives are, if you look at the last 24 months, with uncanny accuracy, you can almost always predict what's going to happen in the next 24 months. And it's going to look pretty similar. And that's because most people are not living their vision of a compelling future, right? And if you don't have your compelling future, especially with your spouse in a relationship, written down, put up on a wall or a whiteboard or a dream board or something like that, you're bound to continue to create the same life that you've always created. And that's just human nature. So if you want change, you can't avoid the uncomfortable conversation about 10Xing our lives together, because I may not even know what the next move you think we should make is. And we continue to live in our happy past of pizza on Friday night, which I love. But it's all about your story, right? And your story is rooted in the past. So you actually have to physically manifest the story of your future for it to happen. Or you're going to be in the same spot listening to this a year from now, 2 years from now, whatever the time frame is. And we all see that in the people around us all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we need to get that conversation scheduled. Dave, let's do it.
I'm putting it on my schedule right now.
So I do want to talk about the immediate relief of avoidance and then also the long-term cost, because long-term costs are so damaging. I mean, really, when you continue to increase your anxiety over something that you are stressing about, or that you're pushing away, or that's hidden under the bed or hidden under the rug, a conversation, a situation, it continues to heighten the fear over time of the person, of the situation, of the comfort between someone. Like maybe not sharing that sooner or going through that bag, David, maybe increase the fear of your acceptance of you and I in a longer space, which could have been done maybe 5 years ago, or 7 years ago.
Whatever it is, fear, anxiety, just not wanting to unzip the bag in the closet, it takes up physical space in your psyche, right? In your mind. And once you remove that, you can actually fill that space up with something that's going to serve you in your compelling future in a way bigger way than, the bag full of stuff. In the bag of avoidance.
The bag of avoidance. So long-term effect of avoidance, increased anxiety, missed opportunities, the lost chances of you to grow successfully in different areas in your personal relationship, at work, whatever area you're looking to tackle. And then also it reduces your self-confidence. I mean, lowering your confidence every day to avoid the thing, handling the similar situations, everything you do. So the long-term effect it's really hard on you at an energetic standpoint. It's constantly in the back of your mind, thinking about and maybe even avoiding thinking about the avoidance, the thing that you're trying to avoid. So the immediate relief, though, on the other hand, is immediate relief of the reduced anxiety. Like, boom, your comfort and fear, like, gone. You did it. You've had it. The relief of the comfort zone. Now it's like maybe David and I now have a closer relationship because the sense of safety is even closer, because I didn't judge him for that, holding on to that bag. It bothered me that it was in the closet because it was taking up space. But I was like, well, one day he'll actually tackle it. But I'm like, it's just this bag of stuff that should like go away or recycle or something.
It's funny. So what you don't know, Wendy, is I became so tired of that I actually put it on my schedule. And I know we'll talk about this a little bit later on in our episode here. But I literally put it on my schedule to tackle that on Friday. And guess what? I procrastinated it out for whatever reason. It didn't happen on Friday. So that's why it happened on Saturday. It was like, all right, I just can't live with myself. And that sort of moves into the next part of that. You end up with this lowered self-esteem, lowered self-confidence over time that you don't tackle these situations. For a lot of people, I know this is strange too, but it's an action of avoidance that allows other people to perceive you as being less than, right? And if you lower the expectations other people have of you, you end up having less demands on you. And this is like a really psychological way of saying laziness, for lack of a better word, right? And I'm probably going to catch some flack in the comments for that. But it's just true, right? It's truth that people are like, okay, I take this action once, you allowed it, twice you allow it, 3 times you allow it. Now it becomes who I am. And your expectations of me are lower. And that can be a super dangerous thing in our love relationship, right? And not that I'm admitting that that's what I'm doing. It's just that what I observe in the world a lot of the time. Does that make sense? Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, it does. And it ties into the segment about love in the time of avoidance, because I want to talk about love, trust, and avoidance. I think it's important. When avoidance creeps into a relationship, it's like a freezing rain, blowing through, killing your relationship and trust. So how do we reignite the flame and melt away the ice of these avoidance pieces that we have in our life that we're both doing? And I think this brings on some discussion points of how powerful holding on to the avoidance things can negatively impact the trust, the communication together. When you don't have the lack of openness, the trust is broken, the conflict escalates, you have emotional distance, and now your problem solving is a little bit reduced because you're not diving into the thing that you're avoiding. And that impacts your personal relationship. And also and if you have hey, we have a fantastic relationship, but like my work relationship, it even goes into that, which we're going to talk about, but I want to stick to like personal relationship right now, because avoidance in the personal relationship, this is what happens. It impacts the trust together. And that's really damaging. And it's very essential for your relationship to cycle around trust and promote open communication.
We all live in either our comfort zone or our uncomfort zone, right? And avoidance is a lot like looking in the mirror. You feel that it's uncomfortable, internally, because you're not handling the thing. But you have to recognize that looking in the mirror, it's actually your comfort zone, right? Because if it's a habit that you do over and over again, it's where you're comfortable. And so taking the action, the uncomfortable action, is what actually moves you forward in life. And your perception is that it's going to be uncomfortable. But if you really have strong buy-in to your commitment to the future, your compelling future, that's where comfort zone is, right? Your comfort zone needs to become the uncomfortable actions. that you need to take time and time again to be successful, to be happy, to flourish, to have an incredible relationship, to have wealth, all of those things. Take uncomfortable actions a lot of times because you don't know the next step or the right step or the best step. And so you don't do anything at all. And I think that's sort of part of the impact on trust and communication in the relationship, because ultimately you don't get what you want and what you believe you should have. And if you're feeling that, your partner's feeling it 10x. Uh-oh. Did I just say that out loud?
Today, this is absolutely true. And I want to share a story of a relationship that I healed that I was avoiding. And it was with my dad. And that relationship, we didn't communicate for, I don't know how many years. It was maybe 5 or 6 or more years that we didn't communicate. I was really frustrated with him. I was mad about his decisions. And he was in a lifestyle that he didn't have time or could create time to call me. So like it was always on me to call him to create like the conversation. And we had just been through things in our earlier days together before he had got remarried that it wasn't resentment. It was more like I just missed our relationship as father-daughter. So like all these years I like held on to this, like, oh, I'm so frustrated with you. But I avoided the conversation. I remember a letter that he had sent to me that wasn't very kind. And he probably didn't write it in a good space and forgot about it. And I'd remembered that, and I had shared it with an agency that I was working with at the time. And they're like, oh my gosh, he's a terrible person. But as the years went on, I realized that I was avoiding this relationship. And I also realized if I wanted a relationship with my dad, I needed to create the relationship with my dad. It wasn't just like, hey, I'm going to wait around, hopefully that it comes. I really had to create the relationship. So I took tiny steps to start the process, and they were really uncomfortable. So one of my tiny steps was I actually flew to his house and said, I'm booking like 2 nights at your house. Can I stay with you? And then like start little micro conversations. And then like the next time I would fly out and see him in California. And it was the same thing. Like, hey, can I stay 3 nights? Can I stay 4 nights? Well, those micro conversations turned into the now like events. Dad loves hiking. So I'm like, my dad loves hiking. Let's go for a hike. And his wife doesn't love hiking. So this gave us a chance to actually start a bonding. And we did this several times throughout, the next 2, 3, 4 years. And what it did is it started creating open communication. I started moving through the avoiding conversation that I had avoided in little steps. It was frustrating because I was still frustrated at the very beginning in those micro conversations. I was like, a relationship just isn't where I want it to be. But I kept trying and I never gave up because I was like, I've got one dad. I've got to see if I can make it work. I'm just going to create a new relationship with them in this adult space. And now we have an incredible relationship. We're besties. We're best friends. We talk all the time. But it was because I put the time and energy into it to move through the avoidance piece that I had been avoiding. I'd moved through the emotional distance. I had moved through the problem, the trust, the judgment. I was like, I need to create something new. And he also wanted that. And that was cool because you can also put all the effort in and the other person doesn't want it, but he also wanted it. And it was teaching him that I actually did care about him. And I was teaching me that he actually did care about me. And his style was that he just doesn't call you a lot. So you have to be the one to call. So I get that now. Whereas my mom like calls me every other day. So it was like, this is great. Now I know how he works as an adult. And now I know how I can meet him where he's at.
Yeah. Great story. I got to live through almost all of it.
Yeah.
As things progressed with your relationship with dad, and we love him. But you said something in there that really caught my ear. And it was at the very beginning of your story. And that was, you received a letter from him and you showed it to someone else. And their immediate feedback was avoidance, right? Like, hey, he sucks, avoid him. And I can tell you that is going to be the feedback you'll almost always get to challenging situations when you share it with the people around you, because it's that avoidance thing that they want you to avoid conflict, right? Because they're all of a sudden living in their own story and imagining what it might be like. And I've seen so many great things go up in smoke because people have sought the advice of someone who didn't really matter in whatever the conflict was, whatever the situation was. And for some reason, their opinion of avoidance had way more weight than your own internal intuition, your trust, and your mission, right? Like your mission was to create a relationship with your dad, but asking a few of the wrong people, or sharing it with them can completely change your mind. So,
and I never thought about it like that, David, because, like I didn't want to share that letter with my mother because I already knew what her opinion would be. And so the closest person I had at the time was a talent agency that I was with. So I showed my agent and they looked at him like, yeah, he's a terrible person. Yeah, you should definitely stay away from this person. So yeah, that I'm sure that affected me now that I think of it, to build up my mind. Yep, he's a terrible person. I'm just going to avoid him.
And so I'm going to derail completely, right? And my history, I have a long history of sales. And there used to be this situation where I would be engaged with a sales interview with someone who was coming along nicely to, participate in what I was doing. And then someone would show up out of the blue, right? They'd like walk in to their business because I was selling B2B. And I called them the walk-on, right? And the walk-on's opinion was predictable because it was always avoidance. It was always, you don't need to make a decision today. You don't need to spend the money. Hey, remember, you've got to make, this ABC. I mean, whatever it is, they had no insight on what was actually going on. So I very quickly learned to, engage the walk-on and either deflect them or get them happily involved with a side project. So sorry for the derailment there, but let's continue back to the discussion points here.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I like that story.
So I'll try and reel it back in after you're like, what is he talking about? And so we started the conversation talking about avoidance, and I suggested that procrastination, poor time management, and perfectionism were all sort of in the same vein. Do you recognize any of that statement in yourself? Because I know exactly where I fit in that equation.
I don't. I think that they're tied together. I think time management comes down to when are you going to tackle the thing? You'd said commitment to do the thing. You have to make the commitment to do the thing. Yeah, of course. So it's like, yeah, time and commitment,
I think we need to schedule a conversation.
Yeah. And then you're like,
but I do recognize myself in that as poor time management, right? And we've worked with a lot of people to help structure our time management. The thing that allowed me to get the paperwork out of the closet was that I put it on my calendar, but it also comes down to commitment, right? And I have an interesting definition of commitment, and that is, doing the thing you said you would do long after the mood you set it in has left you, right? That's my version of commitment. And that's really when it comes down to the successful people that we work with, that we talk to, that are mentoring us, that are coaching us. Successful people do what unsuccessful people aren't willing to do, right? They take those uncomfortable actions. So that's the way I wanted to wrap that up.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Yeah. And I want to move into how you can take the step to start the open communication and trust cycle, because that's important in your personal relationship. And number one, it ties back into what David just said, was initiate the conversation, but you can't initiate it unless it's on your schedule. So you've got to schedule it in, like, hey, we're going to have this conversation about this thing,
10X conversation that is coming. We also have something that we personally call PST, right?
Yes. We call it personal share time. We do call, personal share time with a topic. but to begin the open communication and trust, number one, David's right. You have to schedule it in. And then both people know mentally, emotionally that you're going to have a conversation about the thing. And then you initiate the conversation with kindness, openness, love, non-judgmental. By the way, something that really helps to build yourself up to have that uncomfortable conversation is getting support from a friend or a community or a coach to encourage your mission. There are a lot of things that David and I have gone through. And I remember, David, a client that we had to tackle, and we actually called one of our coaches to say, can you help us walk us through this conversation that we're going to have that's really uncomfortable? And I think we were letting them go. And, but we end up calling our coach to get some good support to help us believe in our mission to do the thing. And then as well as speak honestly, you have to be really deep down honest about where you're at with the thing, even if you're afraid to talk about it, no matter what, because it is uncomfortable, but your partner doesn't know deep down where you're at with it. So you have to be like really dig deep and be honest about the thing you're going to have the conversation about.
In that uncomfortable conversation, when we reached out to our coach, the first thing they asked was, what is your preferred outcome, right? Like, what would you want the outcome to be? And so, that's a little different than just asking your neighbor, what should I do, right? Because then they just give you their opinion. But the other thing about having, a good strategy for open communication and trust in that thing that you're trying to avoid, and you're going to feel like I'm buttering you up here, Wendy. But for me, I really don't like to ambush people, right? And so if I need to have an uncomfortable conversation about a topic, especially with an employee or a partner or a client, I'll let them know right up front the agenda of the conversation, so that they can process their defenses, and not in real time, right? Like, because I truly want most of the time to hear people's feedback as well as being heard, right? There's two sides to every story. So I like that. Don't ambush people.
That's why the scheduling it in, man, scheduling it in. But I do want to dive into this next segment because I know we talked about personal relationships and love and how important that is, but man, let's talk about dodging the avoidance bullet at work. I mean, let's shift gears and talk about how avoidance shows up in our professional lives. And it does. It's that invisible wall that blocks the path for us to have success. But guess what? We have the power. You have the power to break down that wall and pave your own way to success, whatever that is. I want to dive into a lot of this when we're talking about common avoidance behaviors in the workplace and how they impact the team dynamics, because that's important.
So it goes back to just what I said, right? And you and I were business owners, right? And it's interesting, we also have clients. So, there's two sides to that. But we're always thinking in terms of outcome, right? And it's almost predictable the type of actions that you can take to create anger, frustration, and negativity. And avoidance is one of those things, right? Like, if you want to piss somebody off, just avoid the thing that they want to have delivered on time, the work they need to do, whatever it is. And you create that outcome, whether you want it or not. But if you're coming from like that higher power, that higher space, and the outcome you want is joy, understanding, compassion, all of those sorts of high level feelings, then you need to have the behaviors, where avoidance really probably isn't going to serve you very well.
And I want to add to that list, Dave, because you're talking about procrastination here. You're talking about delaying tasks. You're talking about ignoring issues, overlooking conflicts. You're talking about avoiding feedback or dodging reviews that you don't want to hear about, skipping meetings. You're talking about not being able to voice your concerns about something in your workplace. And you're also talking about avoiding challenging tasks because it's just too much for you, or you're afraid to go all in, or you don't really know how to do it. Man, those things are a big deal, and they hold you back in your professional life if you cannot handle stepping into these new tasks or these new way of habits that David's talking about. You're just letting this pile up on you every day that you walk into that workspace and ignoring everything. And it becomes more procrastination, more procrastination, more procrastination. So, I mean, you have to recognize that avoidance is a behavior, and it's also very much alive in your workspace. So I have a way to tackle this, Dave, if you want me to dive into this.
Yeah, I know you're going to share, I think, the Mel Robbins 5-second rule. But I just want to add to this. You have to decide today whether you're the creator of the outcome of your life or you're the victim of it, right? And if you're going to avoid things, you're going to procrastinate, you're going to hide in the corners, you're going to ultimately end up being the victim in this, which is a shitty place to be, right? Because the responsibility is on you, right? Like you ultimately created that, even if you avoided it. And so, taking the bull by the horns and being the creator of the outcome, even when failure is involved, I think will serve all of us, definitely serves us in a higher level. So let's talk about the 5-second rule.
Well, before I share that, I want to talk about, because I think one of the pieces that we're missing in here is the habits. What do you do when you're avoiding something? And there's a lot of habits we do. Smoke a joint, have a drink, go to the bar on Thursday, go sit at the beach, vape. You get yourself in a bad habit to avoid the thing, but yet you're thinking about it, and yet you want to say it, but you just can't say it. Like, how many of us are avoiding a conversation with our parents? How many of us are avoiding a conversation with our husband or wife? Like, there's a thing that's driving you nuts and you want to say it, and it's been years, but you just don't say it because you're too afraid to actually dive in and say it. You're avoiding the conversation. How many times have you thought to yourself, gosh, I could probably help my kid if I just said this. But yeah, I know I need to let them learn this, but if I just said this. So there's a lot of habits that you have to be aware of that you're doing, and share with us right now, like in the comments, drop a comment right now. Like, what habit are you doing right now that's avoiding the conversation? Like, I know when I'm afraid to talk to David about something, it's just like, I don't put it on the schedule. I think about it all the time. I think about it every day. There's not one day that I don't think about having that conversation. And I can't wait now to have that conversation because now David knows about it and we need to prioritize it.
You've got your own plastic bag of stuff in a closet somewhere and I don't know about it.
It's invisible, right? But like what habits are you actually doing that's actually destructing yourself even more so? But hey, I do want to talk about the 5-second rule because this was coined by Mel Robbins. It's such a cool trick, and it's really used for a self-help tool to shift your mind and take yourself from the thing into action. And it works like this. Let me give you an example. So imagine you're in a group of people, and Dave, you and I've been there, like a breakout session at an event or something, and you have a question and someone says, hey, raise your hand if you know the thing. And like, you're not going to raise your hand, or like, who wants to go first? And you don't raise your hand. Like, I don't think so. The 5-second rule is like magic. It's a countdown. And you're the one that be's brave to start. So you start counting backwards. You say to yourself, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then you shoot your hand up and like, pick me. I'll do it, even though you're so scared to do it. And they're like, okay. And then you do it. It's like, it's playing a quick game to trick any worries in your mind about doing the thing you want to do. And also you use this to boost your confidence and become more brave and move yourself with intention back into the place that you need to be to have that conversation. You have questions at work that, I always think, like, when I was in a work environment, there was a lot of people around, like, you question things like, you think about the people at work, you think about the people that got fired, you think about the people that are getting awards, you think about the people that are causing you an issue. Think about the people next door to your office. You're thinking about that you deserve a raise, but you haven't said anything. You think about the different role that you want in your office. These are all things that you need to be like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, raise your hand and like have the conversation. It's so important. I use the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in a situation which I'll be in tomorrow when I go into hyperbaric. I go into hyperbaric, they zip me up. I'm hyper claustrophobic. I have to put myself through 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise to get myself to stay in that bubble for an hour. But it works, and I do it. I keep myself busy enough that I'm like, okay, I'm brave. And then every time I go back, I'm not as afraid because I keep doing it over and over. And I've like proven to myself that I can do it. I remember a story, Dave, where I jumped in the river. I was on a summer swim and my legs got caught up underneath a tree branch. And the tree branch was so powerful in these rapids, it sucked my body down. And I remember like I'm drowning, and I looked up through the water and I'm like, I'm drowning. This is it. And I had one last like burst of energy to try to push myself off that tree log. And I did, and it pushed me out into the rapids of water. I went to shore and I said to myself, and I was coughing because I had been drowning out there. And I thought to myself, I have got to get back in the river like 3 more times, because if I don't, I'll never get back in this river and swim. So I did. I got back in there and I avoided the tree branch, but I got back in there and I did it 3 more times to be like, okay, I know I can do this again. So I didn't know about the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 rule though back then. This was like, I forced myself to do this.
Maybe you should have avoided the tree branches. And now I know why every time I get in the river, you're always like, there's a tree over there. I'm like, it's a mile
Like,
away.
don't go close to it.
I know to avoid it. I know you feel claustrophobic, and so you have a hard time getting in that hyperbaric. So I think that's super cool. And I love you for doing that. But the reverse of that is if we ever go up in a plane and you try and push me out even with a parachute on, I don't think I want to do it. So for that reason, maybe we should put on the schedule, go parachuting, go skydiving sometime. Because I've always wanted to, I've had an opportunity to, but Lord, heights scare me. So I just want to close this by saying, we all have a voice, and you have a voice even if you don't use it, right? Silence is actually using your voice just in reverse. You're not speaking your truth. You're not taking or tackling whatever it is head on. And so you get to choose. Do people hear your voice, or do they just hear your silence and you get run over internally, right? Might be externally too. And you have a decision, right? Do you want to have impact on the world, or do you want to just let life happen and be impacted? Because that's really, things are black and white in life, right? And that's the two opposite ends of the spectrum. You either keep moving forward with your voice, have impact, or let the world run over you and you're impacted.
That's so true. Yeah. So yeah, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, accomplish the goal. And if you're a business owner and you're like, how do I create a culture in my workplace that helps my team not have so much avoidance of conversation and avoiding tasks and avoiding procrastination? I want to share right now some ways that you can be thinking about that as a team leader yourself. Is that okay, Dave? I dive into my notes here. Number one is, it's important for you as a leader to encourage your team to share concerns and ideas openly. And that is all that rides down to the second, like, yeah, you want to encourage your team to share openly. You need to be accessible as a leader. If you're not accessible as a leader, your team can't approach you and actually share, because then they're afraid of you. So you have to make yourself available, or your managers available, so that your team can share. Because if you're not approachable, that team is already starting the avoidance conversation, and they're doing things and they're back talking you, and they're back talking you, and they're showing up just for the paycheck. So open communication, be accessible as a leader, hold regular feedback, have consistent feedback sessions with each other. Not like, hey, we only do it like 3 times a year. Do it way more than that. Like, be closer to your teams. Support the environment that you're creating. Create a place that feels good when you walk into it, so your team knows, like, hey, this is a good, positive space that I'm going to bring my life and spend 8 hours working, So create that environment. That's so important. Define clear expectations of responsibilities, tasks, deadlines. Make sure your team knows about that. That creates confidence so that your team can actually accomplish the goal. And then if the team is undertrained, they are not going to be willing to take on new skill sets if you're not providing more training and development for them. So you have to be, as a leader, saying, I've got to be thinking, like, where is my team going? Where are each person here in the departments going? How can I level up their training and development? And then lastly is always gratitude, appreciation, recognition, reward, proactive behavior, so that the team around you and them are learning what you get when they actually put their time, love, and energy into moving through the space. That creates a positive culture in your workplace. David, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, just in our own personal business with our team, we've been able to avoid avoidance, right? And one of the ways that we don't create avoidance in our culture is we have this thought process called best idea wins, right? So if you have a clear vision of the outcome you want to have for a product, a project, some client work, going out to our team and saying, all right, I don't care whose idea it is, if it's the best idea that will get us to execute toward the outcome quickly and with a higher level of success, then that's the best idea, right? And I know that's sort of different because we've all worked in those organizations where it's my way or the highway, right? Where it's the ego that wins. And if the ego creates the idea, then obviously it's what we're going to do. So you yourself, speaking of myself, I have to be the example. Be the example all the time of being open and not creating avoidance in other people by continuing to criticize and, take back my idea because I don't want to use their idea. You got to be the lightness, right? And if you're not, you end up being the darkness, and that's going to repel people ultimately away from, being with you, working with you, having a great relationship and a great business. I think that's what I wanted to close with, Wendy, on this topic.
I love that. No, yeah, absolutely. That's so great. And I love, David, that we're doing these podcasts like this together because your vision is different than my vision, but yet we know that we're kind of like heading down the same road, but the way that you share it's differently than I share it. So I love, and hopefully our listeners love that too. So drop a comment below what you think about David and I, how we have just a different take on each of these little segments, these topics, but we would know we're both kind of heading down the same road. So
it's funny. It's the way we as a couple work together in business. And that is, I'm really strong on a lot of ideation. I have a lot of other talents, but that's one of them. Wendy has that also. But I can say without a shadow of a doubt, Wendy kicks my butt when it comes to execution and operations, right? Like she can take all of the complex pieces, the ideas, wherever they come from, as long as they're the best idea and, mesh them together and create an action plan of what needs to happen, because ultimately ideas without action are just a waste of neurons.
Well, let's wrap this up. I hope that you guys enjoyed and grabbed some tactical avoidance head-on strategies for your personal life and your work life. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. Stay ignited, like, subscribe, leave us a comment, share this with others that that could help us. That only helps all of us grow together as we keep our own embers rising. So, hey, more power to you. Love that you guys are with us. Until our next episode, keep on rising. Aloha.
Aloha, everybody.